Ralph and them wanted to know if Tony was here. Why, is he gonna be?
You don't know what this guy did for me.
Yeah, I do.
Not get my stripes. Something I can't talk about. Something that was ruining my whole life, and he made it right. What I owe him, I would follow that man into hell.
But why do they have to come here? I don't understand.
This place isn't bugged. The cops and the feds don't know about it. Probably in time they will. Until then... Oh, shit.
And it cracks me up every time that he laughs in her face. Welcome to Soprano. Cut to Black, a Sopranos Sit-Down. My name is Jim Scampoli, and I've seen every episode of The Sopranos.
My name's Jacob Burrows, and I've seen 44 episodes of The Sopranos, getting us up to Pie Oh My, episode 5 of season 4. But who made this episode, Jim?
This episode was written by Robin Green and Mitchell Burgess. These are names we hear constantly. A little factoid we've mentioned in the past that Robin Green did work for Stan Lee at one time. He was his Girl Friday, R.I.P. Stan Lee. This was directed by Henry J. Brockstein, who's a name we've heard before. He's directed 3 other episodes. This is the last episode he directed, but he's a co-executive producer, whatever that entails, for the rest of the series. Now, speaking of sit-downs, that was quite a sit-down to open the show when Adriana falls on the ground and Christopher laughs in her face.
Is that why you picked that clip, just for the pun? Great. Oh, I approve. I do approve. So yeah, leading us into the middle bit, almost now, of season 4, we have a Crazy Horse. I mean, we do open, I need to point out, with the sign Crazy Horse for the bar. I mean, this is the kind of writing you won't find anywhere else. This is why Sopranos is the greatest show of all time, I believe.
Absolutely. It's all coming together. Tony and Sil show up at Adriana's club. Like, it is weird. I mean, I know we've kind of been spacing stuff out as we've been watching them, but it is like, oh yeah, Adriana is an FBI informant. I forgot about that because we're hanging out with Johnny Sack and, you know, his wife and stuff for a while.
I had exactly the same reaction of like, oh, she's really nervous about them being in her bar. Does she really not want it to become like a mob hangout? Is she like, is this like Vesuvio? We don't want the mobsters hanging? Oh, no, yeah, no, she's an informant. But she's a really shit one because she doesn't tell them anything. I guess that's how most informants maybe start out, but over the course of the episode, she kind of bleeds out a little bit of info.
Yeah, it's interesting because as we see, like, for the FBI anyways, it's kind of this Hail Mary. They know she's connected because Christopher is obviously very ingrained with Tony, but she's Adriana. He's not going to be telling her, even though Chris is a dumb junkie. He's not kind of going over details with her, and she's not always around. Like, they're asking her weird questions like, you know, Ralph Cifaretto went to Philly last week. Why'd he go to Philly? Of course, she's like, I don't know. So, you know, it almost is like, all right, you're wasting your time, FBI. But Adriana does witness them dragging in some dude. I think they call him like Chip Soto or something or other. They drag him in. He's pissed on himself. And then I like how they don't bother. Well, I mean, I guess we do see some quick clips of Furio beating him with a phone book, but it's mostly in her reaction that I'm getting the feels and the fear and kind of like, uh-oh, like this is really what you're dealing with. This is what your bar is, Adriana. Wake up.
Yeah, I thought actually when they were sort of showing her face, peeking in at that, I thought they were going to just hang on her face and have like the audio of what's going on because that does make it more scary. But then no, we do get Furio with the old phone book there. So, this made me think like, I guess. Phone books, yeah, one of those things everyone has around. You can always beat someone up with it in this year. Like, you can't anymore. What do mobsters beat people up with that's always around these days, Jim? Bags of ice? Everyone doesn't have a freezer.
Your iPad?
Oh, your iPad. Well, no, it's so light. It'll just slip out of your hands.
It'll just
break. Yeah. Well, it's gotta be something.
In classic Sopranos fashion, like, Sopranos loves to have kind of somewhat random stories to intercut in a way because, you know, we're hanging out throughout this episode. You know, we're hanging out with Adriana and her dealings with the FBI. We have Tony and Ralph and Pie Oh My. And then, of course, we have Janice luring in Bobby. And we see that in this next scene as she's kind of now apparently Janice lives in the same neighborhood as Bobby. Like, I don't know if this was ever a thing before, because now she's peeking out the window and watching him. Apparently he always lived down the street from Livia Soprano. And we see good old Mikey's wife. I think it's been a while since we saw her from season 1, you know, when Mikey's telling her to shut up and calling her.
That's her. Okay. Yeah, no, I was also like, what house is she in? Are they at her house? But no, I guess they're neighbors, and it just never came up.
Yeah. I mean, I guess it's convenient. It works for the story. And yeah, she gets to spy on who's there. And there is a nice, like, I mean, we intercut with Adriana at the hairdresser, but you do get the impression of how Janice and Mikey's wife are kind of sizing each other up. Like, they both have this goal here. They're trying to get their hooks in Bobby Bacala, because he's the most eligible bachelor now.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, he is a great guy. I mean, they keep saying that, and it's so true. He's like the greatest guy in the crew. Because when he first was introduced, I was like, and they made him out like, look at the fat man. Let's laugh at the fat man. And now I'm like, he's like a Winnie the Pooh. He's like a beautiful, not too smart, but you know, he gets the job kind of done sort of guy. Either way, I don't want to drop the fact that they live across from each other, because what the fuck. And it doesn't matter for the story at all. The rest of the episode, it's never like important that they live across from each other. She could have driven there in all the other episodes, or in all the other scenes she's there. So I have no idea what's up with that, and if that will sort of pay off next few episodes or not.
Yeah, it's just kind of to have this shot where she's like on the phone, but then she's also like peeking out the window, keep an eye on what's going on. And I mean, let's kind of stay with this story for a bit, because I know it kind of jumps around, but I guess one thing I like about it is that, I mean, obviously we're the audience, we know Janice, and it is like what she's doing for herself is kind of gross and selfish, but also the advice she's giving Bobby is kind of not terrible advice. Like, she's giving him the right advice. And in a way, Junior is as well, but they're both doing it for very selfish reasons. So I think that's kind of like an interesting way to go about it, because he shouldn't just be sitting there like he's like, it should have been me, and he doesn't want to basically live anymore. He wants to die, but he does have kids. You do kind of have to try to put your life back together and move on the best you can. Maybe they're pushing him a little too soon. But I think it's interesting that a lot of the advice she's giving him I don't feel is terrible, but we just know it's bad because we know Janice is kind of up to no good in a way.
Well, it's good advice in that they're going, you know, you got to get out there and do things and try to put your life back together. But the thing is, his life is full of mob stuff, so it's not really great either way. Like, you got to get out. You just got to beat up some guys with phone books. Furier will take you out. He's got a new phone book. Like, it's... you know, it's not the greatest thing to be doing, but it's probably great for him psychically, much like, you know, when Tony Soprano's doing Mario Kart with people that owe him money. So, you know, kind of works out.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say, because it is interesting that there are two Sopranos characters, like the literal family Sopranos, that are pushing him to get back into his, you know, day-to-day. Because if this was Tony going in and, you know, threatening a man and probably even pushing it a little further, as we've seen multiple times, that does work for him, because then he walks out and he's kind of cheered up. And maybe it's because of people like this in his life that have kind of always been like, hey, you're down, go, you know, take your negative energy out on someone, and then you're going to feel better about yourself.
Yeah, and I think he must have a slight sense of accomplishment there. He goes and threatens this guy and, you know, does a fairly good job of it, I guess. I mean, he's kind of a big, intimidating guy, and he just does a kind of threat there, and Junior is happy that he dealt with it. And I think I mean, it's whatever you do in life, you got to get a sense of accomplishment from it. Otherwise, why are you doing it?
Yeah. And it is interesting because Bobby is all like, at least from the episodes we've seen up to this point, like you said, he is kind of usually portrayed as like the pathetic fat man, but he's like innocent, so we like him. But it's kind of is interesting to see him in his element, I guess, and kind of being a good gangster. Yeah. Although being a gangster, it relies so much on faith. I mean, I'm sure he's doing a good job, but how do you know for sure? He just for sure is like, yeah, he won't be a problem. But how do you know? Maybe you have to do a second visit. We'll have to see.
Oh, well, I mean, it relies a lot on faith in that people have faith in what a mobster is as well. The fact that he's there and saying those things, it's not just him. It's a bigger threat than just the man in front of you at the bar saying that you should be careful, you know? So it's also that type of thing that they much like a police officer, it's not like you can just, oh, I'll just kill this police officer and it won't, like, that will solve the problem that I'm having. You know, if you were to beat up, even if he were to beat up this mobster guy, it's not like that would fix the problem for the guy in the bar, even if he could. I don't know, that's a weird philosophical thing there of society and what we believe in and everything, but more importantly, I also want to mention, of course, Janice is like, hey, you deserve to be Junior's right-hand man. Maybe you should be the boss, like with every boyfriend she has. I bet that preacher guy she dated was also getting that, like, the deacon's not really the kind of guy who should be running things. You should be the pope.
Yeah. Was that the narcoleptic guy, that dude?
Yeah, exactly.
And in great Sopranos fashion, it works so perfect. It's that Bobby has his dead wife's last ziti still in the freezer. And I mean, it obviously represents so much because the way food is used on this show, and just it also does feel just like a real thing. Like kind of hanging on to the last voicemail or something of a loved one that passed away. But here it is, it's this last ziti. And of course, Janice is really trying to push it. I mean, she brings it up like, oh, okay, I didn't know. And then, of course, later in the episode where it's like, oh, MSG in Chinese food, I can't, it knocks me right out. There must be something in the fridge. The ziti. But luckily, Bobby, I mean, I'm rooting for Bobby, and he's still kind of like, no, I'm not ready. It's too soon. I can't eat Karen's last ziti.
I actually saw, I mean, we saw the same scene, but the feelings it evokes in me were quite different because it was like seeing it more from Bobby's perspective, like, and seeing Janice from his perspective, because he is obviously more positive towards her towards the end of the episode. Like, she is actually a positive influence, and he's like, oh, we should go get something to eat or whatever, and that leads to this whole thing. But for me, it was kind of like he's saying, I'm not ready to eat that yet. He's not saying, like, get the fuck out of my house, try to eat my wife's CD, you know? So it's kind of like it's a very good way of showing the progression of where both of them are at this point, I think. And it's a nice end point for their storyline here.
Yeah, that is a good point, because he does see that he will at some point. He will finally eat that ziti. And I do like the little moments of, like, when like you said, he does have a very positive outlook on Janice, and she is kind of helping him. And then when he's talking to Junior about it, and you know, she's been great, and she and they describing the lasagna, and I love that it's reminiscent to me of like when they bring the pizza in, and it's like it was a custom job, you know, extra cheese, extra sauce, whatever. And then because Junior's like, wait, sausage? Like kind of under the cheese, like right with he's like, that's Carmilla's lasagna. And it's like, get out of here, Junior. Always like thinking the worst of people. But of course we know that was definitely Carmilla's lasagna.
Yeah, there's no question. Which is great. And of course she's always lying about food. She brings over Mikey's wife's thing and like gives the exact instructions. We can tell when she takes it away from the table that's going to get hidden away, but I didn't expect her to bring it to Junior, like, here, and pretend that she made it again. Like, it's a big recycling thing where, like, at no point has she cooked anything in her life. She just moves food, I assume. But anyway, let's get into some other parts of the story there. Most importantly, the part with the horse.
Yes. Well, before we get into that,
you need to get into that. Okay, Jim, what were you going to say?
Well, I was going to say we should talk about, because at least going back to where we were in the episode, Adriana is at the hairdresser, and she gets a call from the FBI. They want her to come out and meet. And then, we kind of went over it a bit, where it's interesting how they bring this Danielle character back to basically, I assume this is and again, I'm not even going off of seeing the episodes before. They bring her back to be like, get out of here. See you later. Because she's basically like hands Adriana off to this new detective to kind of handle her case, which does make sense.
Yeah.
But it's gonna be weird as an actor, because it kind of would feel like you're being brought in as this big part, and it doesn't quite go that way. I guess that's kind of like Sopranos for you.
Yeah.
What I think is interesting about it is I like that even though Adriana kind of hates her because she betrayed her, you could feel that she doesn't want her to go because it's like she's a familiar face, you know?
Yeah, for sure. And I think it's interesting the way they're treating her in general, because they're not like, you got to do this or we're going to kill you. They're like, oh, you should probably do this and maybe you should try that. And like, I don't know anything. And she keeps saying she doesn't know anything, and they let her do that. And they let the silence hang later again when they're in the car, I think. And then like she just starts telling them stuff. And because I guess their threat or whatever is like, they don't go into like, and we're going to put you in jail. They're like, oh, it's going to be dangerous for Christopher. And she doesn't believe that or doesn't want to believe that. But then she starts realizing the violence around her in the club and everywhere. So yeah, she starts, I guess that's why she starts leaning a bit more that way. That's, I suppose, why they're not like, we're going to put you in jail for 20 years. Because they probably can't. They probably couldn't. Maybe to Christopher, but not her.
Yeah, and I like the moment here when they have this first meeting and they start talking about Pussy Bump and Sarah, and she's like, he's in the witness protection program. It's like, oh, I don't know anything about that. Do you know anything about that? And then even her uncle Richie, and it's like, well, yeah, he's also in the witness protection program. And it's kind of, mapping out a potential, maybe they're like, Adriana, she went to the witness protection program, that bitch, like, that's the story everyone kind of has to go with.
Yeah.
So yeah, things are like, I guess it is interesting because it does show that these FBI agents kind of do know what they're doing, because it does show they're good at manipulating her anyways. Like you said, just letting the silence hit, giving her some of these details, kind of getting her to notice these things around her now and have to make a choice.
Yeah. And now we're going to talk about the horse.
Yeah.
And the reason I'm excited about this is, Jim, like, you have some Italian blood flowing through your veins. Mamma mia, right? But so you always have like you're always on top here, and you always have like some special insight, like what ZD is, things like that I wouldn't really know about. I still don't. But getting into this stuff, I've worked at a horse racetrack for about a decade, and I know all about horse race tracks, because if you need, actually I don't, I did the same thing for 10 years, but hey, I still feel like this is my area of expertise, so I'm really excited about it. Now,
do you think that Tony was giving some good advice here?
To be honest, didn't work on that side of the track, so But yeah, no, I suppose it's a good advice. Mainly, I just know what a fraction is when they talk about like what a fraction is. That's how they calculate like the speed. I'm like, oh, a thing I know. They're talking in miles, so I still have no idea what it means because we measure in kilometers. But still, so I'd say it's good advice. Got him there in the end.
Did you have random goats just walking around your?
Oh yeah, tons. I mean, we probably did because our racetrack was more rural. So you could probably find a goat if you went into the right stables.
Well, the thing I was kind of concerned about was it the last episode where they kind of set this up a bit? Yeah, no, it was actually in Christopher. It was in the Christopher episode, because that's when they're at the horse track, and then Hesh and his friend almost fight. And then when we were discussing it, I knew the name of the horse. I was like, oh yeah, Pyomai. And then you're like, yeah, I guess. And I was like, oh no, Have I given away that Pyomai is important? Because I knew why the hell else would I know the name of the horse?
Yeah.
But
good point.
I will say, I don't want to jump too far ahead, but I want to just mention real quick the last shot of the episode. To me,
that's very far ahead, Jim.
Yes. I just want to say it real quick. I mean, I'll get into it more when we get to it, but it's one of those images when someone says the show The Sopranos. For some reason, that is one of the first images that pops in my head. I guess because it ties in, obviously, like Tony and the Ducks and all that, and how Tony has this thing with animals that he doesn't quite have with people. Yeah. But I just want to say, great stuff. Like, it's just, it's burned in my memory. Whenever someone says The Sopranos, is when Tony's sitting there with his cigar and he's, petting the horse. But anyway, backing up, I love that. It's classic Ralph fashion. Like, he's kind of just complaining about the stupid horse, and Tony gives his stupid opinion, kind of, and they're all saying it's weird because I didn't feel like Tony was really trying to even push his idea too much, but everyone's commenting on it. Like, Hesh is like, I got to defer to the professionals here. I think they know better. And then even the trainer, I know better. And then Tony's like, yeah, fine. But then as we see, because of an accident or whatever happens, Tony's strategy seems to work out with this race, and Pyomai wins.
To be honest, I was joking. I don't know that much, but yeah, if a horse, the horse wants to run, that's the thing. Horses want to run. They like running. I think I've not had as deep an intimate connection as Tony has with Pyomai, but just generally speaking, you have to hold them back a little bit, because there are horses that will win race after race. But if you go ahead, any horse that's more than a length ahead after one lap is going to be way behind by the last lap, unless they're outclassing the competition, which does happen from time to time. But generally speaking, everyone keeps together. It's easier to run when you're together in a pack. It's the same with the ducks in the sky flying in a V formation or whatever. You help each other out by running together, so everyone kind of sticks together. And also, you don't want to come up on the side at the wrong time, because if you're on the outside, it means a longer running thing, because you're going around in a fucking circle. So if you're on the outside, you're actually running further. So if you're 3 horses deep, man, I do know this stuff. So I mean, his advice is the most basic advice ever, I guess, is what I'm trying to say.
And I love the way it comically plays out, because Tony's doing his thing at first, because then, spoiler alert, Pyomai wins the race. Ralph's freaking out because he put 5,000 on it. I think it was 8-1 or something. And he's like, Anthony, you are a genius. He's like, I insist, because Tony, of course, is like, I couldn't, how could I take a piece of your winnings? He's like, I insist, you're great. And then it moves to the conclusion of Tony he holds his hand out because he made a suggestion, and then it's not enough, and he has to keep getting more hundreds or whatever bills he's pulling out. And it's such a great parallel to how Carmilla is at home trying to talk to Tony about finances, and he's being such a miser, I guess. We don't have money. Look at what's going on. Watch the TV, the stock market, all this. But then he's just, blowing money at the track and gambling and stashing it in the bird feeder. I it does feel like this season's been about, I guess it has been about, because he literally says it to Christopher. He's really isolating himself from not just his mafia people, but even his family.
Yeah, but is he even blowing money at the horse racetracks? Isn't it a sure thing because he just takes money off Ralph, or is he also betting a lot?
I'm pretty sure he's also betting. That's the impression I'm getting with the way he's acting. He's
You're
still.
Right. I was just saying they are up at the till at one point, so he's definitely betting something.
And he's still she's asking for $10,000, and I know he's acting like it's a lot, and he does that with Carmilla a lot. We talked about it in the past of when it was $50,000 for the college. But then he bought her a $50,000 ring or whatever. So sometimes, to him, it's okay. So it is this weird, he's saying oh, we don't have this, we can't do that. And then he literally in the next scene, he goes out and pulls out a whole huge stash of money, and he's breaking off some bills that he's going to take to the track, basically.
Yes, and on this topic, he meets up with Ginsburg. I guess you have your business meetings at the racetracks just to make everything more efficient. Get some advice yeah, sure, why not buy those bonds or whatever? But this whole trust thing, I don't know about this. Which, again, we need someone who's an expert on this to come in, much like I'm an expert on horses, to actually explain, because he's a trust in itself is a good thing. It avoids prying eyes and things, but there's other ways to do it. And he says, yeah, Inter Vivos, a living trust.
Which sets up a great Tony moment where he could say it wrong in vitro. He said he
Yes.
does it in vitro later on.
Yes, exactly. And yeah, so they do the betting on the horse, and Paimai wins. It is a nice, exciting scene. Hands over the cash.
And he does specifically say when they are talking finances, he mentioned something about if Carmilla gets like too independent. Like he mentioned something about her getting into stocks, and then like he's worried about
Coca-Cola this and Intel that.
Yes. And then yeah, with the trust, it's like he describes it as it's more of like a life insurance trust, which is what in perpetuity or whatever. I don't know if I use that right, but like yeah, he mentions it. You're locked in basically, and he's saying yeah, living trust or something different where things don't work out. Tony can take his money and run, I guess.
Yeah, I guess essentially, like, if they got divorced and then he died, Carmilla would still get everything. And, of course, Carmilla and Tony, they've never had a proper fight. They always get along. But in his mind, I'm sure it's like, well, I don't need anyone to have any motivation to want me dead. Like, people already want me dead in my business. So we're good. We're good on that.
And plus, in classic Tony fashion, because I mean, the way he even describes it, like, she takes care of the home, and then he's supposed to take care of the finances. And they even have the scene where he's counting out money for her. Like he wants, like he said, out there it's 1999, in here it's 1955 or whatever, and he very much wants that. But Carmilla is pushing the household into the future.
Well, and even worse about how he describes it, he's like, yeah, I'll sign your things. I'll get your hopes up. And then he signs them, and then he leaves one, and she's like, but that was the whole point. And he's like, float like a butterfly, sting like a bee. Like, what the fuck are you talking about, Tony? Like, he could have broken that to her in a better way. Like, he still wants to set up a trust, and she would probably be fine with it, but he has to fuck it up so bad that he gets the silent treatment for, like, the rest of the episode.
Well, and he even pitches it in this way. I gave you 2 out of 3. Like he's gifting her. He's allowing her to have something, basically. So yeah, he handles it completely wrong.
Yep. And back to Adriana. She's pretending to be sick because she doesn't want to go to Tony's place, because then she might hear something, and then she might, like, she wants to be outside. Like, she wants not to know stuff, because then she can't betray anyone, or like then it doesn't matter if she's an informant.
Yeah, it's kind of a smart play, because just don't put yourself in any of these situations, because then you do have this plausible deniability. And Christopher, like I do feel for him, but then he just immediately grabs his heroin or whatever, and he just kind of
nothing ever goes my way.
Yeah, such like a little bratty thing to say. Like I do feel for him, because he's saying like, this is like part of it. Because it could, I bring this up a lot, but this could be any business or any career. There are things you do like this. It's like, oh, the boss wants us to come over for dinner. This is important. This is networking. This is that. But, poor Christopher, nothing ever goes my way. I'm going to shoot up instead.
Yep. Yep. And there's another sort of similar scene where he comes in, I guess, early in the morning, because the clock placed very prominently says it's like 10 to 7 or something like that. And he puts away his gun, and she's cooking her eggs, and she starts talking about how, hey, we could move to LA or whatever, or Santa Barbara, and like she might as well have said like, and you can be a screenwriter and I'll be an actress. Like, it's not gonna happen.
Yeah.
But yeah.
And then yeah, we have Brian keeps being brought around. Brian's I guess Carm's cousin, and Tony brings him over to the track. I guess he's just, I don't really understand like why he's bringing him around. I guess it's kind of like doing it for Carmilla, and then also like buttering him up in a way. I don't know if it's like bringing him on his side more. And it does feel like he's just one of those, since he is kind of a citizen, like what do they call it? What would they say? Like not a citizen, but just a regular civilian. He's more of a civilian in comparison to them being in the mob, even though these finance, the biggest crooks there are, bigger than any mob, right? But that's where he kind of brings them there, and Ralph's with the horse, and kind of Ralph fucks with him a little bit, and Tony gives a little bit more race advice, and gets kicked up to Tony because it's yet another victory. And then what? O'Brien laughably bet to show. Does that mean like they just come in first, second, or third? Is that what betting to show is?
It's we had a Swedish horse race track, but I believe that is what it means.
Okay. So, and obviously that pays out way less than if you just say bet to win, and they all laugh.
That's just did a quick check, and yes, it's if you're in on one of the top 3 positions. So yeah, he'd still win, but way less.
Yeah. And then what else we got? Well, yeah, I was just kind of going, yeah, and then we get another Tony and Carm. She's mad. Since Tony does mention, just came into some money because Ralph did kick up to him. He's like, let's go on that stock now. Let's do the stock thing. He's trying to make her happy, but that's probably making her even more mad because the stock's already split. They missed out on that. And then actually, going back to that scene you were talking about with Adriana and Chris, because I think that's when, unless something of a different scene here, because he keeps telling her she's bringing up negative shit. Yeah. Because she's talking about how something could happen to him, and then he brings up his the raven or the bird that he saw, and but I love the way he describes it because he's like, I'm already under a what do you call it possibly.
Yes, like a curse or whatever is basically what he's trying to say, right?
Yeah, pretty much.
Great stuff, Christopher. And I mean, we have the chair breaking, of course, and then him laughing about the chair breaking, like you mentioned, in her face. Her places, like she's trying to insulate herself from the mob stuff. But hey, if Mohammed can't come to the mountain, the mob stuff will come to you, Adriana, and you'll just have to overhear stuff, and then you won't have a choice anymore.
Yeah, and it just shows like how naive she is because obviously. Does she, we already know, we saw how they got the club because the guy was like a degenerate and he had to give the club up. So she's not like hip to the game like Charmaine. Like Charmaine understands that once you get a favor, that doesn't mean like, okay, you're all set now. Because even before that, before Chris gets to laugh in her face, Ralphie and his crew get to laugh in Vito's face because he's a big fat man that sits in her chair and breaks it after comically ordering nachos and looking at the menu and getting food and everything, kind of just taking over.
Yes, and I mean, speaking of people being naive, we also have that in the opening clip of like Christopher going, oh, the cops and feds don't know about this place. Probably in time they will. And it's like, not only do they know about this place, your girlfriend's working for them. Fiance, I should say. But yeah, even just like, they don't know. They're 10 steps behind. And it's like, weirdly, sometimes it does feel like that when Adriana's meeting with them and they're like, who's this person? Like, why is this person going here and that? Like, they track all the movements, but they don't know the whys behind it. So I guess that's why Adriana's got to come in and say, no, they were picking up this and that. Because they definitely know whenever Tony goes to this club, it's like, okay, this club is important now.
Yes. Yeah. And we do get we kind of already went over the Bobby storyline, but I do want to cut back over because we get Junior in a hilarious fashion being upset over the cartoon drawing of him on the TV. And his line is so funny because he's like, I'm fodder for cartoonists now. Because Bobby's just like, well, hey, if they were good, they'd be in a museum or something. They're just shitty courtroom cartoonists.
It's a great thing for his whole court storyline because all along it's just been showing the little details, like he's concerned, like they're coming in to judge his whole life and he's there concerned about like the bill for the lawyer for one specific thing and like the parking outside or whatever, like how is he going, like who's gonna drive me there, like are you wearing that to court, like, but none of the stuff that in the actual, like we haven't seen any of the actual court proceedings, we've just seen these little details and they're coming in to like decide what's gonna happen with the rest of his life. He turns around and is glaring at this cartoon. It's given like exactly the same look that's also in the TV, which I think they did definitely intentionally, of course.
It's great. And he also steals change out of that old man's jacket. Like I forget the guy's name, but the guy that fills in for Bobby. And like I love how they have to show us, like a nice zoom in detail shot at like he picks up his jacket, reaches in, finds like some quarters. It's just some quarters, and he fucking takes them still. He puts them in his pocket. Junior is fucking, what a great character. And I love the way it's shot too when he's glaring at the photographer, because it's a shot of Junior they use a lot in promos because it's such a badass, like the camera's pushing in nice and slow and he's got this death stare where when you see it out of context, you're like, oh shit, like what's Junior gonna do? But no, he's staring at a cartoonist because he doesn't like the way he drew him.
It's like that parking garage all over again with Tony walking there and the psychiatrist. We also then again with the horse, Tony starts going like, because at the start of the episode he's like, oh, too big of a commitment, and then towards the end he's like, how's our girl? You know what I think? They got these titanium shoes. We should give them that. And Ralph's kind of like, it's kind of taking the fun out of it for him because he wanted the fun of owning the horse, and Tony's getting all of the positive stuff without any of the negative stuff. So actually Ralphie's like reasoning here, it makes perfect sense. He's like, oh yeah, take down this number and call this guy and he'll fix it for you. And it works out pretty well, I guess, because as far as Tony understands, they couldn't reach Ralph, so he just has to go and do it. And he actually cares about Pyomai. That's the fun thing, is that's how we get to this whole biblical panorama of an ending.
Yes, yeah. Because, and I love that it's like kind of glossed over, but the detail is that the vet won't work till he's paid, because that and we know Ralphie, so we know there's been instances where he just probably didn't pay the guy. And given, like, I get why Tony's pissed at the vet. Like, the vet is a piece of shit because it's not this poor horse's fault that Ralph's his owner. But you're right. Ralph's rationale makes complete sense because Tony is like, Ralph's paying. Ralph is paying for all this stuff. Tony's bringing up these, titanium horseshoes, but he's not fitting the bill for him. So let Tony handle some of the downsides of owning a horse. And Carmela's already upset with him, and she even, I love how she's like, you bought a horse, and he's like, no, like Ralph bought a horse, but it's like, you bought a horse. I can't believe you bought a horse after all this arguments we've been having. And I mean, in between they intercut where we see that everything is getting to Adriana, where she goes into Chris's stash and she's also shooting up heroin, looking for some sort of release from all the stress she's under. But yeah, like I said, the last shot, and I believe, speaking of the promo with the parking garage scene from a couple episodes ago, this is another one of those. I remember they used the shot of Tony coming into the doorway and it's raining behind him and it's dark and it looks intense, like something's going to happen. But it's him showing up and being very sweet with Pyomai, which it's kind of an easy character thing to do, to have this like sociopathic murderer criminal, but then have him be sweet around animals. It's not the most original thing, but it works so well for the character of Tony Soprano, I feel.
Yeah, and just the way it's acted, of course. I mean, he always brings something special to it, Gandolfini. And I can see why this shot would stick in your mind, because a lot of the show, even though it's a great show, a lot of it is kind of visually similar, of like, now we're eating food in this kitchen, now we're eating food in this restaurant, now we're eating food in the car. So this one does stick out, kind of similar to like Pine Barrens, them stumbling around in the forest, which, I mean, that kind of thing has happened a couple of times. But just like whenever they bring in ducks, or the fact that there's a horse in essentially, like, it looks like a manger, almost like a like a Bethlehem situation there, and horse and a goat, and it just it makes it something that I don't think this shot is ever going to be in the show again, or any show. Absolutely.
It's such a great shot. It's such a great ending to the episode, which I'm not 100%, but I feel like younger me, when I was originally watching the show and it aired, I probably didn't appreciate like I do now, because I just wanted like a big showdown or something. You know what I mean?
Well, it is a big deal, because horses aren't supposed to lie down like that, Jim. Like, that's not how they sleep. So if a horse is lying down on their side, something's gone wrong, terribly wrong. So yeah, I guess Pyomai was probably fine. Like, I know you can't say, but I'm assuming that Pyomai got through this. Like, I want to live in a world where Pyomai was fine. So we're not raising the death counter.
Yeah, no, nothing on the death counter, no walkouts this week. Just just getting into the psyche of these characters, just hanging out with them for a bit, and that's when kind of Sopranos is at its finest, in my opinion.
Yeah, good point. But what about your opinion? You can send your thoughts to showswhatyouknowshow@gmail.com. That's an email address we have. Once again, it's showswhatyouknowshow@gmail.com. We call it that because our website is actually showswhatyouknow.com. We can find all of our shows about shows. Jesus, I am in a real loop. What?
Let me cut you off real quick because speaking of that, we did get an email, and it's kind of fitting we could talk about it here at the end because it's more about reaction to our season 3, some of our season 3 discussion. So This is kind of like in a comic book. You get to the letter section in the end, and they're talking about stuff from like 5 issues ago. But hey, this is from Dan. Really enjoying binge listening to the podcast. I've watched Sopranos from start to finish more times than I can count. I'm just finishing up with your episodes on season 3, and I have a thought regarding Jackie Jr. and what was going on with school. I do love that we kind of open up this can of worms of like how he, had Meadow do a paper, but he had supposedly dropped out by then. So it's like, wait, is he just a douche? And it's kind of he's commenting on that here. I'm just finished on. Yeah, I read that. I was sort of under the impression that maybe he never officially dropped out, and that he wouldn't have to officially drop out until the end of the semester when the school realized he'd failed all his classes. Maybe he kept going back to give it another try, getting his grades up. Or maybe it's as you say, and he's bullshitting Meadow, and he got to write a paper on Edgar Allan Poe because he's a douche. Either way, you guys are doing a fine job with your analysis, and I'm slightly disappointed I've caught up with you in real time and now must wait a week in between episodes. Thanks again for stimulating conversation. Looking forward to your thoughts on the rest of the series. Cordially, Dan Paczkowski. I'm sorry if I butchered your last name, but thank you for the email, Dan. We appreciate that. And yes, as Jacob said, you can email us as well at showswhatyouknowshow@gmail.com.
Perfect. You can also, if you want to send us a message in some other way, you can also leave a review on iTunes or your podcast app of choice, which we really do appreciate it. It does help us out. And apart from that, I just have one more thing to say.
Oh, what's that?
Cut to black.
Cut to black.